You're listening to This Motorcycle Life, conversations about why we ride. Episode 6, Rebirth of the Cool. I'm Bruce Philp. Thanks for listening. Well, with apologies to Miles Davis, we'll get to the cool stuff in a minute, but first some important business. I want to acknowledge the promotional support of my pals at Eat Sleep Ride. The stories in these podcasts are about riders like you and me, and Eat Sleep Ride is a great place to find them. You can discover this online community and magazine at eatsleepride.com, and as an avid user, I can also recommend that you download their super useful free mobile app at your preferred app store. I don't ride without it. Thanks, guys. Okay, here we go. Well, there comes a time in a motorcyclist's life when you're ready for the bike you really want. For that first couple of seasons of riding, there's a good chance that you've just improvised. Maybe you got something light and small to learn on, or something so old and battered that it didn't matter if you dropped it. That first bike came with its own excuses, and you were happy just to be on two wheels. Well, that was me, rattling along on my Suzuki Savage, looking like a circus bear and sounding like a spoon in a garbage disposal. I was thrilled to be riding that bike, but I was just as thrilled to see it roll down the driveway under its next happy owner. For a lot of us, that first new bike is a big personal decision, because we're not just choosing a machine, we're choosing a statement. The first motorcycle we invest ourselves in, as well as our hard-earned money, is as much about who we are as it is about what we intend to do with it, whether we want to admit it or not. Well, when that day came for me, it wasn't a long process. I wanted a modern classic. And to be more specific, I wanted a Triumph Scrambler. Well, as that endless winter dragged on, I read and watched everything I could find on that bike, somehow oblivious to expert criticisms that it was slow, or that it was heavy, or that it was primitive. Instead, I explained breathlessly to my wife, it's got plenty of novice-friendly torque, and it will be simple to maintain, and it has knobby tires, and we live on a dirt road, so that's important, right? Well, you just think it's cool, she said patiently, so buy it. Well, I did think it was cool, and I still have that bike, along with the wax cotton jacket and the helmet with the Union Jack on it that I bought to go with it. Not to mention all the farkles it's accumulated in the years since. I'll probably never sell it. That bike is me. Well, it seems to be a few other people too. Triumph is now on their second generation of modern classics. Ducati and BMW joined the party a couple of years ago. Honda's CB1100X stands out from a bunch of retro standards from Japan that have launched in the last few years. And interest in bikes like this shows no signs of flagging. Just this week, Kawasaki announced the Z900 RS, which was a clear tribute to its own legendary 1972 Z1, and the list goes on. There's something about these bikes, the era they evoke and the custom machines that inspire them, that strikes a chord with almost anyone who rides, and lately with a lot of people who don't. It's become a scene, in fact, one that has spread globally, and more interestingly, to the cultural mainstream. It seems like there's more to this than just a fit of nostalgia. And whatever it is, I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. In search of clues, I stumbled across a 2015 article in London's The City magazine with an interesting take. The author's name is Hugh Francis Anderson, and the piece was insightful about the cultural influences on this scene, things you wouldn't think about, like fashion and social media, as well as being pretty frank about the difficult bargain of mass-producing cool. 2 years on, I hoped he might have more to say on the subject, and happily he did. Hugh Francis Anderson sums himself up as a writer, adventurer, and biker. He writes about adventure travel, cars, motorcycles, and style for several magazines in the UK, and I found him somewhere in the English countryside as he paused between competing in a 4-day multi-sport marathon in Morocco and test driving Maseratis in Dubai. Well, he might just have the best job in the world. Here's our conversation. Hello, Hugh.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well.
Good. Well, thanks for speaking to me today. It sounds like you've been through a hairy experience, and if it were me, I'd probably still be hospitalized. So I do appreciate you you joining me.
No, that's fine. No worries.
I mentioned in my opening comments that I had discovered you as a result of an article that I read you wrote a couple of years ago about the custom scene, and that kind of sent me on a bit of a reverie about my own connection to that world and how much I love it. And I was hoping that you could reveal some secrets to me about how it all happened and what it means and where it might be going. So I thought maybe just to get us started, I'll ask you a question that that may seem a little unfair, but I'm having a little trouble with the label. So I think this is mostly about this scene that we're going to talk about is mostly about custom bikes, but I feel like it also includes the kind of modern classics and
Sure.
anything that would be acceptable in the distinguished gentleman's ride somehow seems to fit into this bucket. What do we call it?
Uh, I mean, it's sort of difficult to define it in as much as it's driven by the sort of the modern zeitgeist of wanting to break free a little bit, especially in London. That's what you notice. I'm sure there's similarities there with places like New York, is that it's all work and it's all go, and these are a lot of the guys in this scene, this custom scene, are those who work in the city and want to do something maybe slightly different, a little bit avant-garde, and get out there. And also it harks back really harks back to the 50s and 60s and this whole sort of Marlon Brando, James Dean, Steve McQueen manliness. They just oozed cool. And I mean, I have my own opinions on the way that that's going now, but I think that's where it really derives from the modern scene. And then of course the motorbikes come in a long time ago. I mean, in the States, of course, you've got the whole chopper culture, which is actually now rivaling the whole cafe racer brat style. And then in London, it goes back to the ton-up boys in the 50s and 60s, just trying to race their Nortons, their Triumphs, their BSAs around Ace Cafe on the North Circular in London, to try and reach 100 miles an hour. And I guess it all sort of derives from there. And this is just a resurgence of that.
And it isn't just the bikes, is it? There's a lifestyle that goes with this scene.
Yeah, the lifestyle then around it. I guess it's something I notice. It's very much in with the style. It's this whole. I hate to use the word hipster, but it's migrating into this sort of hipster world of, leather jackets and perfectly groomed beards and tattoos and what I guess this really grew from the underground. It was the guys in their garages who started building bikes, and now it's more sort of the middle class trying to recreate this style. But that's also just part of this 21st century world we live in, where there's an organic barista on every corner, and there's everybody is migrating into more creative industries, which is brilliant. I think I read recently that now something like 1 in 10 young people are starting their own businesses, which is great. So I think it's just the style side of it has probably come from many different factors, but mainly that sort of that idea of harking back to I don't know, some form of originality. But then that's the downside of that, is that originality very quickly becomes mainstream, and then you lose it.
Yeah,
that's what I see now. That's where I'm at now.
That's actually something I want to talk about in a couple of minutes, because I sort of have that sense too, that fashion kind of put the wind in its sails, but that also made it somehow vulnerable to all the things that happen to fashion. So can you talk a bit about so it seems like there were kind of two beginnings here. There was the Ace Cafe ton-up boys thing that you talked about in the 50s and 60s, and then this resurgence. And do you have a sense of what triggered it and when and how that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly I don't know what triggered it. I mean, for me, I'm now 26, so I'm firmly in the age bracket for all of this. But my beginnings with it started reasonably organically. With my father was a design engineer, and so I always had this idea of wanting to design my own things. And then one of my cousins is a massive motorcyclist, and when he was 17, he was restoring BSAs and Mustangs, and I don't know why, but his brain just worked in that way. So as a kid, I got into motorcycling, and then when I got my license when I was 17, I bought a 1980 Yamaha XS850 and started customizing it in this sort of brat cafe style without noticing. There wasn't really a scene around it yet. I just, I wanted to build something that looked this way. And then increasingly, as the years went on, you start seeing more and more. And it wasn't really until I moved to London that I really felt that, that change when people were really starting to invest in this. And then you have then a lot of the custom shops started opening. When I wrote that article, the Custom Crazy one, I interviewed this guy called Adam Kay from Untitled Motorcycles. They were based in Camden, and he had only started 5 years before that, just fixing up old bikes in a garage. And then, as the years went on, his customer base started to change, and people, instead of bringing in their, 70s Honda 754 or something, they were asking him to customize it and make it look older, make it look like a cafe racer. And I think that's really maybe started for real, I guess, around 2010. That's when I first became aware of this being a scene, if that makes sense. I'm sorry if that doesn't come across quite right.
Yeah, no, totally. So what's interesting about that is that I feel like the Triumph Bonneville has a place in this story. So John Bloor buys Triumph, and he decides to try to resurrect the fame of the brand, and he does this by bringing back bikes that are kind of iconic to that brand. And out comes the Bonneville. Yeah. And that was kind of my way in a little bit, but I was never sure whether it was the chicken or the egg here. And based on the chronology that you just described, it sounds like it might have been a bit of a trigger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, hugely. I mean, the Bonneville, I would say, is easily one of the most famous bikes. Also, I mean, and mainly because non-bikers know about it. Non-bikers know about Triumph. Non-bikers don't necessarily know about Norton and BSA and those brands. Of course, everybody knows Harley Davidson, but the British bike, everyone knows Triumph, and everybody knows the Bonneville. And I think that because it was a staple for so long, and at the time, it represented the very best in British engineering, and people were investing in this. Whether or not old Bonnevilles are still reliable is another question. But at the time, they were the super bikes of Britain, and to have one was incredibly cool. And then that's just only then further portrayed when they started coming into films. I mean, the biggest is Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. Okay, it's a scrambler, but it's based as a Bonneville engine in it, and then the whole movie scene starts to revolve around it and cool people. Steve McQueen is cool. I mean, he was the king of cool. I coined him that, but that's his title. And so I think then, as a trigger, then in recent years with the custom scene, the Bonneville were the first. Triumph for the first to bring back the Bonneville as this idea of a modern classic, because I think people want something that maybe represented the past, or represented something realer. The world we live in today is so disposable and throwaway, and I think when you're looking at classic styling, will always be classic styling, and the people who buy that, they buy it because it's a Triumph and it's a Bonneville and it looks cool. And then, of course, you then off the back of that Bonneville, you have the other bikes that have come up, the Thruxton. That's a production cafe racer. That's a crazy thing to think about. And then the Bobber, the recent Bobber, which is also a brilliant bike, and that's going into the more sort of chopper style, a single solo seat, and it's sort of it's I'm not sure if does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of agrees with what, my kind of instinct about this was that somebody made a marketing decision, 15 years ago, and it sort of lit a fire. I think one of the things that I find sort of striking about this is how global it is. If you sort of poke around on Instagram long enough, you'll see bikes in this idiom from kind of every corner of the world. And what's
Oh
interesting
yeah.
is that they don't they don't declare themselves in terms of their provenance. Like you have to look to see that this bike is from Belarus and this bike is from Brazil and that bike's from Japan.
Hmm.
You talked a bit about this in your piece for the city, how this became a global phenomenon. Can you sort of summarize your argument here?
Yeah, I mean, how it became a global phenomenon. I think it really is down to social media now, for sure. The likes of Instagram in particular has definitely propelled it. And I guess the first outside of the UK, the first company I really saw doing this was Blitz Motorcycles in Paris. Have you heard of them?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're pretty much everyone knows who they are. I started seeing what they were doing, and that was primarily through the medium of film. They were one of the first to, get a camera crew, get on their custom bikes, and ride around. And they had this really aspirational videos of just a couple of guys getting on their custom bikes, heading off into the mountains with their tents, and just getting lost. And I think very quickly people sort of started to jump on this idea of bringing back this idea of freedom, of getting out there. And really the motorcycle is the best way to do it, because you're exposed to everything. You really feel it. And this is when people have asked me, why do you ride motorbikes, or oh, I'd love to. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this as well from friends who don't ride, and they go, oh, I'd love to get my bike license, I'd love to ride. And I always say it to anybody. I said, if there's one thing you should do, it's get a motorbike license and ride a motorbike, because for me, there's almost no greater thrill than that. And it's incredible that you can have that and it's legal. You could just do a bike license, get on two wheels, and off you go, and you're completely exposed to everything. And so then I think, you seeing videos like that expand, and then I saw Deus Ex Machina come up in Australia, and then that's then buying into the whole surf culture. And there's a very modern idea that the guys who surf are very chilled out and cool, and they're just sort of beach bums, and
Right.
they're just having the time of their lives. And then they start, with the whole clothing line, that ties it back into this lifestyle and fashion side of it. But the bikes they were building had this sort of brat custom style, and they had their surfboard racks on. And again, these guys were making videos and taking great photos. And I think that that's sort of just ricocheted around the world through social media. And more people are just like the idea. I think primarily people would want to get into it because they think it's cool, because it is cool to have a custom bike and ride around. You look like a boss, with the open face helmet, cruising around. It's this and it is this very much this idea that's, I think, ingrained, especially in the male population of the 21st century, is this, Steve McQueen, James Dean, Marlon Brando being cool, being, rebel without a cause, just get on my bike and just head out and I think that's how it's exploded around, and then there's a lot that's come off that still.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it does feel like it's somehow started out as a male thing, although it's certainly not a male thing exclusively
No,
now.
not at all.
Yeah.
No, not at all, not at all. I mean, there are massive amounts of female riders, and just sole female rides. There is a group in London who just female riders who have shows and have events, just female riders, which I think is wicked. And that's also it's great to see. Also, I mean, we're not wanting to sound sexist in any way, but as a man, I think chicks who ride bikes, that's hot. That's cool. You're like, I love seeing women ride motorbikes, because maybe it goes against the grain, or at least it goes against what you would traditionally think.
Yeah.
Normally, if you look back in history, or you look in movies, the woman's always on the back of the bike with the dude riding, and I think it's pretty cool for women to actually to be riding the bikes. And I ride with a group in London called the Pots and Pans. There are about 25 of us, and we've got now, but there are two girls who ride with us, which is also awesome. Just friends who have got bike licenses and like riding bikes, and we all head off on big trips together, and it's awesome fun. And that's the other side of it. There's this whether you're male or female, I'm not sure if it's like this over in Canada, but you ride in the UK, and if you see another biker, you nod at each other. Same in Europe, you nod at each other. It's like a global community where you don't need to know who anybody is, but if you're riding a bike, there's a mutual connection, there's a mutual understanding. You say hello to each other, and I love that. And if you've ever broken down on the side of the road, chances are, if there's a biker who sees you, they'll come and stop and ask you if you're all right. And I just love that. That's what makes it a community, and that's what makes it a culture, is that it sort of is a standalone thing, which I love.
Yeah, so do I. And you mentioned a word that I think is kind of important to this, and that word is fun. When I was growing up, and really through the '80s and a lot of the '90s, motorcycling's menu consisted of cruisers and sport bikes, and so you either looked like a criminal, because you were, on a Harley, or you look like a criminal because you were on a Gixxer. There wasn't a lot of. It was all pretty serious and a little bit antisocial. And this scene, whatever we want to call it, appears to have had a lot to do with injecting the fun back into ride. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And I think it's far more present over in the States with the Hells Angels. That's this idea that people have, especially that I've noticed working in it and writing about bikes. Was particularly noticed with Harley Davidson is that they want to have a modern audience. They want young guys to ride their bikes, because people have this idea in their head that guys who ride Harleys are either sort of, midlife crisis and have bought a whacking great Bulldog custom, which, sets off car alarms when they drive by, or it's this Hell's Angels vibe. It's not that they're outlaws and it's underground, and it's not, it's not legitimate. And so you just, especially Harley Davidson, with the marketing over in the UK and the amount they're investing and wanting to get, especially into magazines or online for a younger audience, that they're migrating towards being in the scene. And I know that there's a bit of a stigma about it still with Harley Davidson, but I think they're incredible bikes, and the technology. And I mean, they're the second largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world, so they're doing something right. But yeah, it does certainly, the whole scene does originally buy into this idea of being a bit of an outlaw. And it's the same with the Ton-Up Boys in London. They were chasing 100 miles an hour, and they were getting pulled over by the police, and they were guys who were working class, who couldn't afford vast expenses, so they took their bikes apart in their garages and built them up and changed them. And I think everybody just wants a little bit of that. In the mainstream world, everybody wants a little bit of rebellion, and biking is sort of that, a little bit of that rebellion.
Yeah, I think
that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
I'm sure.
Yeah, totally.
So that sort of makes sense for you as well.
Are there any other sort of tailwinds that helped us along? I caught a term in something you wrote, retro modernism. Is that somehow separate from what we've been talking about, or is it sort of the same thing?
Well, retro modernism, yeah. Well, for me, it's just very much taking the idea of something that's retro and modernizing it, and that for me is actually less about the bikes themselves, and it's more about the people who are riding them. It's the piece that I wrote was for the City magazine, which goes out to time poor, cash rich guys who work in banking, and these are the very people that custom bikes and cafe racers and shoppers. These were the very guys who were once upon a time completely opposed to that. And so the modernism in it is that you're taking a retro idea and you're opening it to a completely different group of guys. And that's what I was most surprised, and also what I loved about things like the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. It's putting the gentleman back into that. It's taking a custom bike, and it's taking a chopper, and it's telling guys to put their tweed suits on and their bow ties and go riding. And it's all harks back to a different time, a different era. Yet it's by combining combining it all, it makes it incredibly modern. Does that sort of clarify it?
Yeah, perfectly. Perfectly.
Yeah,
Did you do the DGR this year?
I didn't know. I was in. I think I was I in. I was in Morocco then.
Right.
I was in Morocco. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't. But I did it last year, and I did it last year with Triumph on a on a new street twin. But it's great. It's great. Have you done one before?
No, it's kind of on my list.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, it's a complete whirlwind of guys and girls riding their bikes, and it's thousands of people just filling the streets, and everybody's having a great time, and it's also for a good cause. So I like that. I like that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does look like fun. You mentioned Deus Ex Machina earlier. When I was in LA last winter, I went to their place in Venice where Wooly builds
yeah,
bikes, and there were two bikes in the parking lot and about 40 people in
yeah,
the cafe.
yeah,
So
yeah.
consuming espresso and Wi-Fi, you couldn't escape the idea that this had somehow crossed over into the cultural mainstream. Why do you think that
Oh
is?
yeah, yeah, big time. And I think that's also best displayed in London by places like the Bike Shed, started by this guy called Dutch. It's brilliant, and I this is sort of what I was trying to say in the article, is that I love that this scene exists, and I love that people are riding old bikes, but it now has migrated very much into the mainstream, and it's for that reason. There are places like the Bike Shed. There's an exhibition space, then there's a shop selling all the clothes, selling the Belstaff jackets, the head and helmets. And then there's a cafe, restaurant, bar, which is what's always full. And I think it's probably because whether you ride or not, it's 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 cool. They make it very cool, and they make it very modern. And again, I said I don't really like the word hipster, but it is. I mean, hipster just means a modern, trendy person, and that's really what it is now. It's buying into that sort of the potentially, the once outlaw idea of having a shaved head and, big beard and tattoos, and that's all considered normal now. That's okay. You can go to your job with a great beard. You don't have to be clean shaven anymore. And I think these places, like the place Deus Ex Machina you mentioned, and the Bike Shed, it's just a meeting ground for like-minded people. Especially when so many people are working in creative industries, in places like that, you're around creative people, and if you're just sitting there for the day, you don't necessarily ride a bike, but you're sitting there for the day, drinking good coffee and working on your laptop with quick Wi-Fi. It's really a meeting place, whether you ride a bike or not. That's sort of what I think on it.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. It's sort of fashionable these days to kind of sneer at hipster and the word and the people who, kind of wear that label. But I actually think that that's one of the best things that ever happened to modern society. I think these people, however you define them as a group, they brought us maker culture, and they brought us a kind of kind of benign anti-establishmentarianism, and they in some sense brought us custom bikes, I suppose. I think they've been a positive force. So I wish it wasn't an insult, which it seems to have become, but I'm
Yeah,
completely with you. And
yeah. I guess I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, the reason why I have this opinion, and it's more. I mean, the style is cool. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I don't have any issues. Anybody who wants to ride a bike, they're cool in my book. I guess for me, it really, having maybe a slight gripe at the movement is primarily on the bikes themselves. I like this idea that, as I said, I was 17. I bought a bike on eBay. It didn't work. I slowly took it apart, tried to get it running, and it didn't really run, and it now doesn't run. But you're doing it yourself, and I like that. And going and having adventures on it. I mean, this bike, when I finished university, I went with a friend, and we drove 4,000 miles to the Arctic Circle in Norway. And I did this on a bike that I built, and okay, it broke down, and I had to have it work done on it out there. But that's sort of that's all part of it. It's all part of it is sitting on the side of the road trying to figure out what's wrong with your bike. The issue I have is the people who go to a bike builders and they'll pay £15,000 for a £2,000 bike just because somebody has butchered it and put gold leaf paint over it, and whatever, they've made it look like something to a given brief. What I like is people who are doing it themselves, and that's where it started, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
It's this idea that the very foundation of custom bikes was, well, one, it was mainly about performance over styling, and two, these were the guys in their garages doing it. They were playing around, they were messing up, they were cutting their frames up and re-welding them when things got wrong, and messing around with carburetors and just getting greasy and dirty and having bikes that didn't really run very well, but they were trying. And now if I've got 20 grand, I can go and pay someone to make me something, buy an old BMW R80, fix it up so it runs really well, and then put clip-on bars on and put a custom seat on, and suddenly I have a custom bike that I have bought, but the ethos of it isn't there anymore.
Right, and I suppose that's kind of a double-edged sword. And I wonder if even the builders themselves feel that way. I mean, I think about brands like, I'm saying brands, but brands like Dave's or Jane Motorcycles in New York, or even El Solitario, who kind of started off building bikes and have drifted into, apparel and fashion. And I really am of two minds about it. I mean, talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I think everybody wants to monetize what they're doing, and people who say that they don't, I think are not being completely honest. Because if you're a passionate bike builder and you're an engineer and you're a mechanic and you're good at what you're doing, suddenly you have customers who are coming in wanting something different, and you can do it. For you, it's just cool. Yeah, I'll rebuild this old bike and change the style a bit and sell it on for more money. That's great. And so that starts to become a viable business. That's what I was saying with Dutch and the bike shed, is that I'm most impressed that these guys have an enormous space in Shoreditch, which is an incredibly expensive, popular area to be, and they're making it work through the custom motorcycle scene. I think it's brilliant. And of course, not everybody can necessarily afford to go and buy one of these bikes. But what they can do is they can go and buy the apparel, buy the T-shirts, buy the gloves, buy the glasses, the jeans, the whole selvage denim jean scene and the Red Wing boots, and it's all great. But that's it's a way that you can style yourself around a movement without necessarily having to fork out loads of money for it. And so I think the reason why people have started, or brands started, making lines of clothing, is that it's just another way to monetize. There's another way to commercialize what they're doing, and that should not. I want to make clear that that's not, I don't think, a negative. That's just business, and business is business with whatever you're doing. Maybe it detracts from the foundations of it all, but if I were in that position, I would do the same. I think you probably would do the same as well, because if you love something, you want to grow it and you want to keep working on it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But of course, the funny thing is that it really caught the attention of the fashion industry more broadly, right? I mean, moto culture is, ever since, Kate Moss was wearing Belstaff in the 90s, all of a sudden, not only is riding gear now more fashionable, which is great, but you can buy all kinds of, high fashion stuff that's just inspired by riding gear, right?
Oh, yeah, completely. And that's definitely. I don't know if you ever saw the Into the Unknown, the BBC documentary with David Beckham and his mates driving driving through the Amazon on Triumph Scramblers. It's people like that who are driving the fashion world, because for some people David Beckham is a god and an icon and incredibly cool, and they want to wear what he's wearing. I mean, that's the very premise of fashion, and with models nowadays, people will want to wear what Cara Delevingne's wearing. People wanted to wear what Kate Moss was wearing, and it's the same now. So guys, and I think, I mean, I know I've already said it, but it is very much this sort of 50s and 60s idea, the leather jacket and the jeans and the white T-shirt. I mean, that's James Dean, and what guy doesn't want to be James Dean, you know? Yeah, that's
Right.
sort of the way that's sort of the way that I see it. Is that yeah, these guys and girls, I mean, they're buying into this idea, and I'm not sure. I know because I'm not sure if you've ever been over to the Race of Gentlemen that was in Wildwood, New Jersey. Have you ever
No,
been over to that?
no, I haven't.
Uh, yeah, that's really cool, and that's I mean that gets into a completely different side of the scene, which is the North American scene of Harley Davidsons and choppers, but you see the same there. It's just you could be a a full, you really see some full bikers, with leather vests and patches and looking really mean and all their skull rings, but that's that's in that's in now to look like that. So and yeah, so if you take something as small as a group of bikers and a custom scene, and you can make it mainstream, and of course people want to do that, and that's very much why the motorcycle manufacturers as well, alongside it, you have their staff doing that. Then you have Barber as well. But I mean, the amount of that Barber campaign, because Steve McQueen once wore a trial master. Now suddenly
Right.
Barber is the poster brand for Steve McQueen, which isn't, it's not bad. It's just clever. It's just clever business and clever marketing. And similarly, the motorcycle manufacturers, Ducati with the Scrambler, BMW with the R9T. I mean, in London at least, you can't walk down the street without somebody riding past on an R9T, which as stock already looks like a custom bike.
Right.
So it's really just it's infiltrated everything, and yeah, I said again, it maybe takes away slightly from the foundations, the ethos of what it once was, but it modernizes it, and as I said in the article, it gets old bikes back on the road as well. Yes, you have the whole modern side of it, but a lot of people still want to ride a Honda 404 or a BMW R80, which 10 years ago would be sitting in someone's garage collecting dust and not running, and now they're on the road again. So that has to be applauded.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, not to sound too much like a Pollyanna, but I also think it's made riding more approachable for
Oh
the
yeah,
general population. And how can that be a bad
yeah,
thing?
for sure. I think I've noticed in London. I mean, I generally, unless I'm going somewhere with someone, I don't take public transport in London because it takes so long, and then traffic's so bad that nobody really would think of driving if they wanted to go into town. But a journey for me in London that could take 45 minutes, I can jump on a bike and do it in 15 because you go around the traffic. I think the laws are different there. You're not allowed to filter, are you?
No, just
Is
in
that just
California.
in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which I think is completely what's the point of having a motorbike in the city if you can't go around the traffic? But in London, at least, you can get somewhere that would take 45 minutes in 15 because you can just go around all the traffic. So for the people that live in big cities, especially, I mean, I can only really use London as an example because I've lived there. But it's also a really ergonomic thing to do. It makes sense, spend less money on a little bit of petrol for your bike and get somewhere quicker and park right outside wherever you need to be. That certainly has to be an element for it, for it expanding, because it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, and when you take common sense and you blend it with really cool looking clothes and accessories, you kind of got a winner, right?
Yeah, because I mean, sure, yes, riding in cities like London is far more dangerous than cruising at 80 or however fast you want to go on the highway, because you're going in a straight line, and in a city you've got all the hazards that come from that: drivers, pedestrians, people not looking where they're going, red lights, whatever it is. But at the same time, and I'm definitely guilty of this as well, I will get on my bike in London and ride somewhere and not put gloves and a jacket on. I'll just, if it's a summer's day, I'll just head out in my shirt and go to wherever I need to go, because sort of this idea that, because you're going slowly, you're somehow safer. So that means people can ride in style, because really you're not going to go and do a motorbike trip without a decent set of waterproofs, and waterproofs aren't cool. Whereas in London, you can, if you put a battered leather jacket on and you've got your jeans on, whatever, if it rains for a couple of minutes or it's a little bit wet outside, it's fine. You just dry off. So I think that definitely contributes to it.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk about the bikes for just a minute. So I subscribe to the
Sure.
same, email feeds that everybody else does, Bike XIF and all those kind of guys. And I see these bikes land in my inbox, and I kind of go, "Wow, that's really beautiful." And then my next response is, "Can you even ride it?" It seems like these things are becoming more frequently works of art, rather than machines built to a purpose, or that's the impression anyway that I'm left with. Do you, from a street cred point of view, how rideable do these bikes really need to be?
Oh, I don't think it really matters. I mean, there are some people who ride some questionable motorbikes around, potentially thinking that it's cool. No, for at least for guys in the city, the bike is from getting from their apartment to work or their friends. You're not going to be on it for more than half an hour. You can ride anything for half an hour. I would love to see, actually, if there are any stats out there on the amount of riders who live in a city and actually take their bikes out of the city for whatever reason. And I would hasten to think that it's probably a very small percentage of people. They're pleasure riders around town rather than heading out into the country for the weekend or actually using it as a form of transport. I mean, I honestly ride a bike everywhere, whatever I'm doing. If this trip to Morocco I was telling you about earlier, that I went to the airport with a 150-liter rucksack on my back. I mean, you can use them if you want to. They are very usable, but I think really people don't so much use them as a form of transport, other than a tool to further propagate this idea of coolness.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of what it's about. But what I'm also starting to see, and it's also how I'm feeling myself, is I think that we're very soon going to see a resurgence of stock classics. There are so many bikes now that have been customized. If I see a guy riding down the street on a stock BMW R80, for example, I'm like, damn, that's cool, because he's riding it like it was built, and I think that's really cool. And they're few and far between. And it's the same with the Japanese bikes. There are some incredible stock bikes out there, which I think that's what we're gonna start seeing next is the resurgence of restoring stock bikes as they were. So they're like they came out of the showroom in the 70s, and riding that around. For me, as somebody who writes about bikes and loves bikes, that excites me far more than somebody who's got a chopped up, Triumph Bonneville chopper. That doesn't excite me as nearly as much as if I saw, a Yamaha XS850 in stock condition riding down the road.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I sort of just made up my own question in saying that, but that's sort of where, if there is a question coming on where I see it going, that would be it.
Well, in fact, there's a couple. My next question was going to be, and I guess still is, anything that's fashionable eventually is going to become unfashionable, obviously. And you hear already people grumbling about being tired of cafes and scramblers. Even choppers are quickly developing their own kind of, cliched grammar. And even though they're taking up some of the slack, there was a motorcycle shop in Brooklyn called Union Garage, who kind of made a bit of a stink this year, but not going to the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride because they thought it was too exclusive or not inclusive enough, I think would be a fairer way to say it. There's just a sense of some kind of backlash. How is this playing out globally? I think you've just told me that you're sensing it's happening everywhere. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there is this sense of weariness, is a nice word to put it, for it. I think with anything, the more people that get involved and the more people that do it, the less cool it becomes. And I'm afraid to say, a lot of the people I've met through motorcycling, who I've in passing, a lot of them are posers. And I mean, interesting what you're saying about Union Garage. That there is a sort of small band of people within it who still are trying to be too cool for school. You know, they still want to be a bit rebellious and a bit mean and a bit, exclusive. But I think that anybody who is in it, anybody who rides bikes and has custom bikes or modern classics, whatever it is, who's part of this scene, will slowly start. It will slowly start to become the norm, and then as soon as things become the norm, they're not so cool anymore. And then you'll get potentially the people sort of pulling out of it. People will maybe at some point they'll stop going to places like the bike shed, or they'll stop going to the cafe in Deus Ex Machina, because it becomes too popular, it becomes too hip, and then they go on and search for the next up and coming underground thing that you can sort of latch onto. I know it sort of sounds very negative in saying that, but I think that's just the cycle. That's just the life. That's just the way that the world works. Especially with the emerging younger generations, everybody wants their originality and everybody wants to make a statement. Especially in the burgeoning world of creativity, and more writers and photographers and videographers and graphic designers. I mean, the amount of creativity going on is huge, and then with that comes a desire for originality and something that they can believe in. And I think that it will start to dwindle with custom bikes. Not yet. I don't think we're there yet, but the energy isn't quite the same as it used to be. A few years ago, it was really exciting. I remember, and I was fully in that when I finished university. I remember going to the launch of an Edwin Jean store in London, and the whole street was just lined with bikes, custom bikes, and everybody looking really cool and with their leather jackets and smoking rolled up cigarettes and their beards and drinking beers, and just a whole street full of bikes just for this one little denim store opening. And me as a 21-year-old who had always been into bikes, and I'm suddenly around people who are older and they look cool and they're riding cool bikes. It was at that time, and I really was sort of like, wow, this is a thing, This bike that I've been building in my garage for a while. There are other people like this. That's cool. Now it's plastered everywhere. Now it's on Instagram and Facebook, and everybody knows about it. It's sort of less cool. So I wonder if kids or people of a similar age who are into something like motorbikes, if they came to it now, would have that same feeling. I don't know. I think it's just about lost its edge of being new and fresh and exciting, and it's now just a thing. And at some point, that thing becomes a not thing, and people move on to something else.
Right, and that
but
is.
I can't predict what it would be. Otherwise, I'd like to make a lot of money.
I remember that from your piece for the city. You said that there was no predicting future developments, and I have to say, I mean, it does seem like there are some storm clouds on the horizon, because you've got this fashion cycle working against you, but you've also got a whole generation of young people who are, going to graduate to that point in life where they might have kids and mortgages, and they may. Yeah. As we all do, lose the time and interest in bikes for a few years. And, those two things combined must be quite terrifying for the industry.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's maybe why brands themselves have been investing so heavily in making modern classics. Because there's a little bit of I've had days when I've gone, shit, I need to go somewhere, and my bike, I know it's going to take me 20 minutes to kick it, to get it going. The carburetors are flooding and I don't have time to fix that. You have all these issues, and that's part and parcel of having an old bike. Whereas you get a modern bike, and the amount of extras, the amount of packages you can buy for them, you can really customize it into whatever you want it to be. You can still have that, but a bike that you get on and you press the button and it goes. Or even the technology that's going into the bikes, ABS, that's crazy. Keyless ignition, you just have to have the key in your pocket and the bike's on, that I think is only just starting, and that's going to get bigger and bigger. And you can see it again with brands like Harley Davidson, the new launch of their 2018 collection. You can see the way that design is also, it's still this in the custom scene. It's for people who want something a bit different. So those guys who maybe would lose interest, or would wake up in the morning and need to go to work and wouldn't want the hassle of having to deal with a 40-year-old motorbike that needs a bit of tender love and care to get it running. They want to get on something just like getting in a new BMW or a new Mercedes, and just getting in your car and off you go. And they have that with a working bike that looks cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's definitely some life in that. Yeah, I mean, I think Harley and Triumph are both they're both just killing it in terms of making great looking bikes that work like modern bikes.
Yeah.
So that's reason for hope. You mentioned earlier, you used the word originality, and for some reason my mind went to El Solitario, and I'm sure there are others like them.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can think of a custom shop or a community in the world that seems to be leading the way forward.
Yeah. That's tricky to see who's doing that at the moment. And it's interesting you mentioned El Solitario to have. I mean, that just goes to show the reach of a small once bike builder in the Basque Country. I mean, it's crazy that people like that are being spread around the world. And same with Blitz. Are there people who are starting to lean away from it? Not that I've seen noticeably that warrants mentioning. I think it's only really been maybe 4 or 5 years that this has become a thing, and people are still very much on that. And I think in Europe that's best demonstrated by Wheels and Waves. When that started, I mean, when was that? I think 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, that was really a handful of guys going to Biarritz to look at some bikes, and now it's a thing to do in its own right, and it's got thousands and thousands of people coming from even across the globe to come to this custom bike event in Biarritz, where you can get your beard trimmed and you can get tattoos and you can buy your Red Wing boots, and you can. I don't know yet if I've seen anyone that I think is really pushing away from it, other than those who are building bikes for art. You have the guys like Hazan, and he's building bikes that are pieces of art. I think the same with Shinya Kimura.
Yes.
He's got Chaba Engineering. I think he's based in California. And he's another guy I think who's building bikes that run, but to me they're pieces of art. And that's another thing in itself, building bikes not actually to be ridden, but building it for the design and the beauty of it. That I think is awesome. Having a hand carved mahogany seat on a motorbike is completely useless, but it looks cool.
Yeah.
So that's a different branch of it, and that's the really eclectic design artists who are doing that. The other way, I don't think I've seen any big changes really within the mainstream of this clique, as it were.
Yeah, which is interesting in itself. I mean, I guess whenever there's artists still involved, I have hope, that there's still more ahead of us than behind us. So maybe just to kind of wrap it up, a colossally unfair question, because that's how we roll here in Canada. What's the best bike you've seen all year?
Oh, the best bike I've seen all year. Oh yeah, you're putting me on the spot there. I must say there was the new Bruff is pretty awesome. I was up on we've got a brand in the UK called Mallow London. I'm not sure if you've heard of them.
No.
But they did you should check it out. It's MALLE. They create motorcycle inspired luggage and bags and stuff, and they're brilliant. They're real craftsmen. But they also are within the community, and they do a Mallee Mile each year, which is a 2-day event where people go and drag race and hill climb their custom bikes at some country house. And then this year they did their inaugural, the Great Mile, which is the longest custom and vintage classic bike rally in the UK, and that was from up near John O'Groats in the north of Scotland all the way down to the bottom of Cornwall, which was 1,000 miles. And then I actually did that on a Cafe Racer Harley Davidson Sportster, which was an interesting experience because a Cafe Racer Harley Davidson, it's not the most comfortable of bikes. But whilst we were there, the chap who bought, I can't for the life of me remember his name, the chap who rebought Bruff, he bought the name Bruff and has been rebuilding them. He was there and he was doing it on one of their new Bruffs, and I thought that was a beautiful bike. I've enjoyed that. What other bikes have I seen that I've quite liked the look of this year? I reckon the Bruff Superior, it's the SS100. That's the bike for me this year that I've seen. I've gone, well, that's pretty awesome.
That's an understatement. That's a good one. Tough to beat.
Yeah. It's a cool. Yeah, it's really cool. Not sure it quite warrants the price tag that comes with it, but it's great. Oh, it was Mark. His name is Mark. Mark Upham. He's the guy who bought it, and the SS100. Yeah, it's a great looking bike.
Cool. I'll have to make sure I put a link to that in my show notes. Hugh, this has been so much fun. I could keep you on the phone for another hour, but I won't. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Bruce. It's been fun. It's nice to chat to somebody who appreciates bikes and also lovely. I mean, what a lovely compliment for you to get in touch. It's really kind.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure.
It affirms that at least some of the things that I'm writing about, other people are interested in. So that's a huge compliment. So thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you. Well, here's the thing about Steve McQueen. Yes, he was talented, and yes, he was handsome, and yes, he could ride a motorcycle. But his persona was really about doing whatever the hell he wanted. From his delinquent childhood to his time in the Marines to his romantic life, nobody could really ever boss Steve McQueen around. At the height of his acting career, his studio contract expressly forbade him from racing motorcycles at all, but he did it anyway, entering races under the pseudonym Harvey Mushman. That's what made him cool. Like a lot of people, I put off riding motorcycles for a long time. There was always an excuse not to do it. Kids, career, responsibilities, not enough time. And when I look back on the day I finally decided to take the plunge, I realize now that it was about rebellion as much as anything else. Not against authority, or anyone in particular, but rebellion against a lifetime of responsibility. Just like those time-poor London bankers, I guess, I had defiantly chosen an irresponsible machine designed for the sole purpose of doing irresponsible things. Because as I guess I finally understand, there's nothing cooler than just doing whatever the hell you want. Well, thanks for listening. You'll find show notes for this episode at thismotorcyclelife.com, and that's also how you can reach me if you have questions, comments, or suggestions. You can always find me on Instagram at thismotolife, where I like to post pictures of bikes I find on the street, especially the cool ones. To take us home, here's a recommendation for your This Motorcycle Life playlist. And this time, only one kind of music will do the job. If you were a 1960s rocker racing your home-built Triton on London's North Circular, you were a rockabilly fan. The band is Blue Mercury Coupe, and the track chosen especially for us is called Daytona 69. Check it out, however you like to get your music. And keep staying alive out there.